There's been a lot of stories about what went down and why it went down. A lot of people who were really, had a really, really difficult time with this. And some of whom really resent me. I wish they knew the whole story.
I'm Sally Christensen, the founder and CEO of Argent, a women's workwear brand. And this is Work Friends, a podcast for those who take their work, but not always themselves, seriously.
Work Friends.
Today on Work Friends, I'm joined by Gregg Renfrew. Gregg is the founder and CEO of Counter, a beauty company that launched this year. She also was the founder and CEO of its predecessor, Beauty Counter. To back up a bit, in 2013, Gregg first set out to create a clean beauty label, a somewhat nebulous term that we'll discuss too, and had breakout success with Beauty Counter. By 2021, the company earned a $1 billion valuation and was sold to a private equity firm. Gregg officially stepped down from her role as CEO in 2022. When the business went into foreclosure under the new leadership, Gregg moved to buy back the rights to the company name and its signature product formulas. Fast forward to the present, Counter is Gregg's newest venture. It offers some of the same best-selling products, same clean promise, but in many ways this is an all-new chapter of her career. Today we'll get into how she's approaching round 2 of being a beauty founder, applying lessons of the past and setting industry standards. Now, on Work Friends, Gregg Renfrew. First of all, congratulations. It's officially Counter's launch day to timestamp our conversation.
Thank you. Very exciting.
Before we get into it, and I'm excited to ask this because I know there's an answer to it, I want to hear about your biggest oh no moment this week. What's gone sideways and how did you handle it?
Oh, God. Okay, let's see. My biggest oh no moment this week. Well, you are asking me on Monday, okay, just to be clear. So I'd say my biggest oh no moment. Well, I'll tell you exactly what it was. I was going to wear one of your jackets on the way over here, and I realized halfway here on the 10 freeway that I had left it hanging in my closet. And unfortunately, I was super excited to wear it. So it's going to get some airtime next week. But that would probably be my oh shit moment.
I feel like that one's fairly innocuous. So I want to start at the beginning. You grew up in New York. Where in New York, and what was that environment like?
So I was born in New York City 1,000 years ago, and never actually went to school in the city, but I moved outside of the city when I was, about 4 years old, and moved to Katona, Bedford area. My parents then got divorced. My dad moved back into the city. And so I would spend my weeks in the country and my weekends in the city. And that was kind of, it's so funny to think about now. Like, my parents would just put me on the train and I would go into the city with my little brother and run up and down the halls of my dad's apartment and, hit all the elevator buttons and do all those things that kids do in the city. But, I grew up with two very loving parents and a younger brother with whom I was close. And, I had an interesting childhood.
What were early examples of work that made an impression on you?
Well, I think that, I came from two parents my parents were both from relatively well-positioned families, which I bring this up only to say that when I was young, my dad, he was a finance guy, very successful on Wall Street, and then decided to become entrepreneurial and put a whole bunch of money into a real estate concept that would have been, literally decades earlier, predecessor to Realtor.com. And it was exciting, but he lost basically all of our money. So work and I have had an interesting relationship since I was a little girl because I grew up with financial instability, even though I had come from parents who had come from well-positioned backgrounds. And so it's always been a big part of my life is needing to stand on my own 2 feet, having financial independence, earning money. If I ever wanted to do anything, I needed to earn that extra money myself. So I think I started working when I was literally 10 years old, and I've been working ever since.
Mm-hmm. That's a fairly consistent theme that comes up is our guests are raised to be independent, like financially independent. Would you change that experience if you could? I imagine it was hard to witness your dad failing in such a way.
I think that would I change that experience? Yes and no. I think that of course, everyone dreams of having parents that, well, I shouldn't say everyone, many people would think that having parents who are married and financial security, a nice house with a picket fence and, things being relatively stable, parents in good health. My dad got diagnosed with cancer when I was 14. I think that most people would say that they would prefer to have a scenario that was not like mine. But I think that in many ways, I grew up in a really loving family. I remember when I got married, someone mentioned having come from a broken home, and I didn't see it that way. My parents really handled their divorce really, really well. I think having some financial insecurity can help you dream bigger. I think that my parents instilled in me at a very early age the gift of confidence, and they always said, Greg, you can be anything you want to be in the world. You can be the president of the United States if you want to be. Just we're going to have to work really, really hard. So I don't look back and wish things were all that different. Obviously, I wish my dad hadn't gotten sick. But I think that people who look like they live in perfect circumstances often don't either. And I had a lot of really great things that came with my family.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the failure too shaped a lot of who you are and what you've been able to accomplish, with this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, look, at the end of the day, when people look like, I actually had this interesting moment yesterday where, and this happens from time to time, where I was ordering an iced tea and a woman said, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I think I know who you are. You Greg Renfrew. Huge fan of you and your work, which was really, really, really nice. And we started talking about why I did what I did and all of that. And she said, you're just such a huge success. And I was like, I mean, yes, no. I mean, yes, I've enjoyed some success, but you have no idea how many times I've failed to get to where I am today. And I think seeing my father dream big and fail and still get up the next day and see another day, it shows you that resilience is an important part of the equation in business.
Yeah, necessary. Absolutely. Especially starting something from nothing.
Correct. But in general, I think there's not a single straight line to the top for anyone in any corporation. There are so many mistakes that come with and failures that come with success.
You went to the University of Vermont.
I did.
What were you studying there?
My boyfriend. I mean, literally, I was seriously, my youngest daughter, so I was like, Mom, I got another C. I was like, don't worry, babe. Don't worry. The A students are going to be working for you C students later on. I literally majored in my boyfriend in college. That was kind of like my whole thing. I went to the University of Vermont, wasn't my first choice, wanted to go to UVA, didn't get in. And I just enjoyed my time in college. I come out of an all-girls boarding school, and I really focused on my social life and predominantly my first love.
Same experience. Undergrad was all about, and I credit it for my soft skills. I'm like, I drank too much. I did as little as I possibly could to get C's. Honestly, my GPA was garbage. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter. But I had all these extracurriculars that really, namely drinking.
Totally. I feel like it's funny because people, I will say this on a sort of academically, I decided to major in English. I've always been a voracious reader. I really love to read. I read every single night of my life. And I will say that my command of the English language and my ability to communicate has served me well in business. When people ask me what they should study to get into business, I would say English, because if you can't write a solid email or text, if you don't know how to articulate what you want with a colleague or whatever it is, you're going to have a hard time in business, because business is about people and communication is at the forefront of everything you're doing. So thank you to UVM for that. And thank you to my boyfriend, who was also named Greg, for making my college experience really fun.
What you touched on, though, is everything, because I think women oftentimes get stuck in the trap of going heads down and really focusing on the work. And promotions and informal information is coming from conversations that are happening at the bar, at the golf course, more traditionally, but they're places where you're cultivating relationships, but really gathering information. And it's those relationships that keep you on the right path for promotion. Likability is a huge part of business, like it or not, I think. All right. So went to University of Vermont, and after graduation, I read that your mom actually gave you a bit of a push to get to work.
She did.
Can you speak to that?
She did. It was a slight nudge. On my graduation day, I was given a check for $5,000, which was a fair amount of money. Although it didn't really go that far in New York City. It got me my first and last month's security deposit, and I think my first month's rent. And then I remember hitting Ann Taylor to buy her suit or two to interview, and a briefcase with my initials on it. And she said, "You're on your own," and that was that. And she really meant it. she could have afforded to give me a little bit more money, but she wasn't having it. So I graduated and she said, you can do whatever you want to with this money, but just know, and I mean this, that I'm not going to give you any more.
Was that startling, or did she prepare you for that?
It wasn't startling. It was not surprising that my mother would do that. I think I was a little frustrated because a lot of my friends were, going to go be ski bums for the year, or they were going to go travel the world, or they were going to do all these things. And she just said, absolutely not. I've given you a debt-free education. Like, you're on your own. So it wasn't startling. I think what was startling was after I got to New York and I was making $19,000 a year working for an advertising agency, and I asked for a raise, and after a couple months, and I racked up like $1,000 on my Amex bill, and I called my mom and I said, I have credit card debt that I can't pay, and she said, well, get a new job. That was startling. She would not give me another dollar.
Wow.
And so I switched immediately over to Xerox Corporation. I started making $40,000 a year, paid off that, and learned that she meant business when she said she wasn't going to give me any more money.
Typically early 20s, I imagine that's what age we are. It's such a formative time in your life where you're learning so much about yourself, learning about the world. How did this influence, I think, or inform kind of how you were living your life, I guess, outside of work? Did it make you more serious and did it make you stressed?
Well, I think that financial stress is something that I've lived with my entire life because I grew up, as I said earlier, with financial insecurity. So I understand financial stress, and I've had it in my adult life at times as well. So I really am empathetic to and sensitive to people's financial stress. It's when I interview people, I always ask them, like, what do you need to feel comfortable? I'm not what do you want, but what must be true for you to be able to like live comfortably without complete stress, because it really is a major thing in a lot of people's lives. But I wasn't stressed. I think it made me more creative. It made me look, I had to figure it out, right? So I was a hustler. I knew I needed to make money to support myself and to support myself in the lifestyle that I felt, to which I felt I was a customer wanted or whatever. I mean, I could have kept going with my $19,000 a year job, but it would have meant a lot of compromises that I wasn't willing to make. And I really felt like I had it in me to do more. And going back to what my parents said to me as a kid, I mean, they were just like, you've got this, like, just go do it. My mother was like, you've got this, you'll figure it out. Yeah. I mean, she had every confidence in me, and she knew I would. And I immediately called a few friends and within weeks had a new job.
I'm fascinated by this, and we are going to get into you starting your own companies, et cetera. But I'm intrigued because I consider myself risk averse, but I'm obviously outside looking in very risk tolerant. Like, I've started a company and gone through all the hardships that you speak of. But I also think that it's a privilege because I do feel like I have some sort of safety net, but my safety net, it's not different than what you're articulating. I just have confidence and was told basically that I could figure it out. Does that make sense? Like, do you ever think of it, of how you tick in that way? Like, do you consider yourself risk?
I'm a huge risk taker. But in certain areas. I mean, for example, I have a husband who's an extraordinary athlete, and he'll go down a mountain on a mountain bike, like 1,000 miles an hour, and bungee jump and things like that. Not a chance in hell. Mm-hmm. So I know my physical limitations. I mean, I'm a perfectly fine athlete and I love to ski and things like that. But like, I'm not risk averse in business, and I'm extremely direct. So I'm also not risk averse. I'm not conservative when it comes to my life socially, things like that. I'll take risks in my social life. I'll certainly take risks in business, but there are other things that I'm more cautious about, like
I think
things.
There's a business fearlessness that like jumps out to me, that feels like it was ingrained in you by your parents.
I also just think I think that we all have different skill sets and gifts. I have the ability to see where things are going. Like, that's like one of my superpowers. Maybe I don't have very many, but that one I do have. I can anticipate where things are going to trend. And it's maybe they've just started, but I'm well ahead of the curve. And I can see that. I can see it every single day of my life. I can imagine what seems impossible to others. And so when I'm taking a risk, it doesn't seem so risky to me.
What would you have done differently at the start of your career, knowing what you know now?
It's a really good question. I probably would have embraced technology more than I have in my career. math has never come easily to me, and technology. I was always at the forefront of technology until I had kids, and then I stepped out for like 1 year, and man, that was the worst decision of my life. So I do think that embracing technology and really looking at what technology can do for me in business, I think that that's something I could have done better for sure. When I look back on my career, I'm pretty. I've had a lot of really great jobs that have taken me to a lot of really cool places, and I've met a lot of amazing people and learned so much. So I don't have a whole lot of regret in my career.
What were other roles that shaped what you wanted to create yourself in those? Because some of the jobs you had included like launching a bridal brand and serving as the CEO of a children's brand. I mean, it's all incredibly entrepreneurial. So were there any early mistakes that you think about?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, anyone that's crazy enough to work in the bridal business in general, but specifically with bridesmaids, you literally have all these people that you have the bride who wants everyone to look, like $1 million. I remember this is before all the crazy destination weddings and things that are going on today. But I think that I started this business because I hated the bridesmaid dresses that I was wearing. But you got the bride who doesn't want to pay for the bridesmaids' dresses, but they want them to look really fantastic and high end and all these things. You have the bridesmaid who's, hey, probably bitter she's not the one getting married half the time. But second of all, she doesn't have any money because she's young and she's wearing a dress that not of her choosing. Oh, and she'll tell you she's one size when she's actually another. And so trying to keep the bride happy and the bridesmaids happy at a price point that is accessible to the bridesmaid and with a look that is, makes the bride happy is just an impossible conundrum. So that's something like, that was like the worst decision ever. Uh-huh. But, with that said, it led me to meeting Nicole Hindmarch when I moved to London at her company, The Wedding List, which led me to bringing The Wedding List to the United States and starting one of the first multi-channel retail businesses in the U.S. So one thing always leads you to the next. And, yeah, so that would be an example.
Well, I want to hear more about that, but I also want to hear about the initial idea for Beauty Counter and when it came about and what was the push to finally launch it. Because I imagine it was in the back of your head earlier than when you launched it, right?
It's interesting. I mean, I think a couple of things. First and foremost, it's the entire journey with respect to my passion for the environmental health movement, which then led to other things, started at the urging of my friend, Leela Rose, who's a fashion designer and a really, really close friend of mine, who told me I had to watch An Inconvenient Truth. And that was in 2006. We were at Cafe Cluny. I mean, I still remember the conversation so well. And she said, Greg, you're super outspoken. You're very well connected. You need to watch this film. You need to be a mouthpiece for the environmental health movement. And then subsequent to that, I was watching so many of my friends in New York getting diagnosed with different types of cancer, both women and men. I watched my best friend struggled with fertility for a really long time and ultimately had a child through a surrogate. And she wasn't the only one. Many of my friends were struggling with fertility issues and or giving birth to kids with significant health issues. And then I went to work for the Hilfigers, running a children's clothing company. And during that whole time, I started thinking about, like, what's wrong with the health of the earth? What's wrong with human health? Where are the connectors? And one of the things that I could point to is our exposure to toxic chemicals. And so when I was running Best & Company, the children's clothing company, everyone was talking about organic cotton, which was important, but I kept saying, like, what are you washing your children's clothing with? And is that non-toxic? So it wasn't, there wasn't some like straight line to Beauty Counter. It was several years, lots of research, lots of conversation, making lots of changes in my personal life, getting rid of plastic and moving to glass, taking my shoes off at the door, getting rid of my Formula 409 and washing my floors with water and vinegar, just doing a lot of things. But when it came to skincare and personal care and cosmetic products, I just couldn't find anything in the market that met my newly established needs, which were performance, on trend, aesthetically pleasing, and safe for my health. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of over a long period of time how I came up with the idea to start Beauty Counter.
And then there are two standout characteristics of Beauty Counter that set it apart. So one, it was a clean beauty brand, which you just spoke to. And two, and it sounds like this came from your bridal experience, you enlisted consultants who sold the products peer-to-peer, almost like the Mary Kay Avon structure. So I want to talk through both a little bit more. So you've touched on the white space around clean beauty. How do you define clean beauty? You've given the backstory, but I think it's confusing for consumers since there's no one universal definition.
Yeah, there is no universal definition. So first and foremost, I think that there were actually three distinguishing characters, and I think that the characteristics of Beauty Counter we coined the phrase clean beauty. We created the entire industry. And I say that without arrogance. It's just a fact. And it was because at the time there were brands that were all natural or eco-friendly brands, but they weren't able to commercialize them because they were so focused on being eco-friendly that they were losing the person that wanted the traditional brand aesthetic or, performance. Who was unwilling to just think about just the earth, if that makes sense. And the reason we coined the phrase clean is we thought we can reach everyone with clean. It was more of a universally appealing terminology. So I think that's one thing. I think in terms of today's consumer, I think of it as, I can't answer it in like one word or two. My own definition of clean is complex and comprehensive. It's not just taking chemicals of concern that are linked to the different health issues that we face, whether that's cancer or reproductive toxicity or, endocrine disruption or neurotoxicity, and I could go on. It's not just restricting ingredients. It's also looking, are we ethically and responsibly sourcing the ingredients? Are we transparently listing the ones we choose not to use and also the ones we choose to use? Are we, pre-preserving ingredients and extracting them through a loophole and then saying they're preservative free? So for us, it is a really complex thing. And I think today's consumer just sees, because all of the multi-branded retailers have created their own definitions of clean, the consumer has no idea what clean means. And they see something like good, clean skincare or good, clean makeup, and they think, okay, check the box. But that doesn't actually mean anything more than saying something's all natural today. There is no regulation over clean, which is why I would say there are three things that we really built our business on. And the other thing that was really separate for us was our just intense advocacy efforts to create comprehensive and sort of updated legislation in both the state and federal level cosmetic reform, because the laws were antiquated and not protecting the health and safety of Americans or Canadians.
Yeah. I also want to hear about the MLM structure. Why did that work for the company at the time? And was that born from the experience you had with the bridal company? Because you touched on that.
No, it had nothing to do with bridal. And so I think that one of the misconceptions or whatever is that we were like an MLM, and we did have aspects of so when I took a look at the opportunity to build the business, I saw department store distribution of all products, but certainly beauty products waning. I think no longer were they able to dictate to consumer that this is the edited selection you should have. And when I was watching someone talking on Instagram the other day about luxury brands and why things aren't going well. And I think that you need to co-create with your consumer, and your community and brand are one and the same. I felt like we had an important story to tell, and the story was the need for safer ingredients. And I felt education was always going to be at the forefront of what we did. And I also felt like it was not only difficult to sell through department stores or specialty stores, but it was also hard online because the online purchasing, and again, remember, this dates back to 2010, 2011 when I was concepting the business. It was really, and still is today, very easy to replenish a skincare or color cosmetic product online. It is harder to match your skin tone or see the scent profile when you're purely buying it through an e-commerce platform. And so I really wanted to have physical distribution, but not through department stores. And a friend of mine said, have you considered direct sales? To which I was like, hell no, because I had a really negative impression of it. And oftentimes I still do for a lot of those companies that overpromise and underdeliver, and they're out there today. I could speak to a whole bunch of them. But what I did love about it was giving women an opportunity to participate in their democracy, to lead the change, to build businesses from the comfort of their homes. They were the OG creators. I mean, everyone would say, oh, you have these direct salespeople and we have micro-influencers. I'm like, no, they're literally the same women that you're paying over here. Yeah. You just think of them differently over here. So we created a platform upon which women could build businesses, they could educate, and they could advocate simultaneously through this powerful community. And that to me was such a powerful thing to be able to do.
Starting a company one-on-one when it's a physical product, especially, and when it has the nuance of someone needing to touch and feel and smell and try on, distribution is king and trying to figure out the unlock there. And I think tapping into evangelists, it's necessary and kind of the impossible solve that we're all looking for. So it makes sense to me, especially because when we do discover something that we love as a community, we want to share it with our
100%.
friends.
And today when you're looking at platforms that are out there and people are, applying them for allowing women to earn off of their outfits or their skincare regimens or whatever from the comfort of their homes on their Instagram or their TikTok or whatever. And that's exactly what we've been doing all along. And I think it's super important to give women opportunities to earn and to use their voices. And going back to something that you and I both discussed earlier, women gain confidence through action, through having some form of financial independence or being able to turn to their spouse or partner and say, I've got dinner tonight, or yes, we can afford this, but to do it while they're also part of meaningful change. Like that is powerful and exciting. And it's something that I actually fell so in love with when I was building the business.
This time of year, we all have a holiday something to look forward to and a dress for. Argent's new arrivals bring the season to life with styles that meet the moment. Luxe satin and velvet are perfect for those 3 or 4 parties you've already RSVP'd to. And premium knitwear is the cozy, chic answer to holidays at home or on the road. As always, Argent's Italian wool suiting ties the season together, whether the day calls for a sleek blazer or a full power suit for toasting to a job well done. Explore what Argent has in store at argentwork.com. From all of us here at Argent, happy holidays. Looking back at Beauty Counter, what are you most proud of? I'll give a second part of the question, and which parts still leave you with some regret?
Oh. I mean, should we start with the regret? I mean, for one thing, I, sold so much of the company, to say the least, to finance the rapid growth in inventory. People look at me and they think, oh, you sold a business for $1 billion. You must be a billionaire. I'm like, gosh, I'm like, no. I own such a small piece of the business. And it's frustrating to think how much of the business I had to sell because we were growing so quickly because no one would loan us any money. But I think in terms of the things that I'm most proud of, for sure, hands down, creating economic opportunity for women and helping them gain confidence through being in action, taking the power of our collective voice and joining a group of women who were really sat on both sides of the aisle, had very different religious points of view, political points of view. I mean, you name it. They were different on so many levels, but they could find common ground in their desire to make the world healthier and safer for all. That's the thing that I'm most proud of. Yes, I'm proud that we passed pieces of legislation. And of course, as an entrepreneur, it's nice to know that you raised capital, built a business, and sold it successfully, although it didn't work out as well as I'd hoped. But I think that the thing that I care about most and has resonated throughout my entire career is really working with women and seeing them shine.
I really would love to hear more about the regrets too. I feel like there are more in there, but
I mean, there's so many regrets. I mean, hiring a best friend and then having to let her go, that was a bad one. Listening to other people who, especially men, and I don't mean this anti-men because so many men have been instrumental, but I had so many people project their points of view on what my strategy should be, underestimate me. I had a CFO at one point who really was just constantly like going behind my back to do things. And I fired him. And I said to him, this will never happen again in my life. What's happened here? And I said, shame on me for letting it happen. And shame on you for ever working for a CEO that you didn't respect and for underestimating me. And I think that I let others influence me way too much because I lacked confidence and I was always trying to keep everyone happy. And in this iteration of Gregg Renfrew, as the CEO I am today, I'm very comfortable saying, listening and then making a decision and sticking with my decision. And that's not to say that I'm always going to be right, but I could list on multiple hands the number of things when I listened to someone else and they were wrong. And I was absolutely dead on right.
It makes me emotional even listening to you say that because we're so quick early on to give up our power in the entrepreneurial journey. We're also so quick to give up our equity. Women especially are undermined throughout the process, and you have to develop such thick skin and really become unlikable to a lot of the people that we encounter. We're also operating within a patriarchy, but like I have gotten to the point where I have had to lean in so much to my confidence and be like overly vocal because there are so many detractors. So I'm sorry to hear that, but I also know that it sort of made you into this force that you are. You've always been, what resonates with me is it's always been in you, I would imagine, but it's like it's a forcing function to maturing or getting like experience that you wouldn't have gotten, I think, had you not gone about this on your own. It makes you grow up quicker, I think.
For sure. And I think that, I now look at being a woman as an asset, not a liability. And I wish more women going into these rooms, going into raising capital, going into a board meeting, going into whatever, I wish more people had the confidence to say, I've actually got this and I actually know that I'm right. Mm-hmm. And I created something, and others with whom I work will say like this thing I always say, like, we all have our fall on our sword moments. And I will defer, if you're willing to fall on your sword, like if you're really, really willing to fall on your sword because you think that you're right about this thing, then you usually are. But I will say, like, you better be sure about those moments that you're choosing. If you ask me to do go against what my gut is telling me, you better really want to bet on it. We all choose those moments really carefully, and when I say to my team, like, I'm going to fall on my sword on this one, I just trust me on this, like, they do. And I think that 99.9% of the time when people are willing to say that, they're right.
Also, the dream team, like those are the people that I want to be surrounded by, the ones that are going to push on my beliefs or conviction.
Pushing and patronizing are totally different things. You want to have rigorous discussions. I don't always think that I'm 100% right. I know I'll be directionally right. I always say, like, I'll come up with 10 ideas every single day. 2 of them might be brilliant. 5 might be complete garbage, and 3 might be like for another day. But I don't want somebody to yes me to death, but I also don't want to have someone, patronize me all the time because they think they know better just because they did something, 30 years ago, some company that no longer exists, or, maybe it's the biggest company in the world, but it doesn't even matter what Apple did 20 years ago. What happened yesterday? And how does that apply to this business in this moment?
You've touched a couple times now on the policy work that you've done and the legislation that was passed. Can you speak to that a bit more?
Sure. I mean, I think that when I started Beauty Counter, the U.S. had not updated a major federal law regulating and governing the cosmetic and personal care industry since 1938. It was part of the Federal Food, Drugs, and Cosmetic Act that FDR put in place in 1938. And since then, many tens of thousands of chemicals and ingredients have been introduced into commerce, of which less than 10% have been tested for safety on human health. And so with that in mind, I set out to update federal laws. So as a community at large, we sent hundreds of thousands of text messages and emails into members of Congress. We held over, something close to like 2,000 meetings on the Hill. I testified in front of Congress. We got bipartisan support for cosmetic reform, and we were instrumental in helping pass MOCRA, which was the modernization of the Cosmetics Regulation Act, which went into effect about a year ago. But we also helped pass, about another 15 pieces of legislation. And it wasn't always like specific to beauty. It was like working with Hawaii on banning chemical sunscreens because they were killing the coral reefs, or helping people remove certain chemicals out of children's, products. But we really did care as a community about protecting the health and safety of people and utilizing the power of this large community to affect change on both the state and federal level, and in Canada with Parliament. The Canadians are farther along than the Americans are with respect to banned ingredients. I mean, when I started Beauty Counter, had only banned 11 ingredients from all products, whereas like the EU had banned or restricted 1,400. We're now up to a whopping 30 in the U.S. So we are dangerously far behind the times, and we're going to keep at this in my new company, Counter, because our health matters and clean is worth fighting for.
I mean, first of all, what another like feather in your cap, and I want to get to Counter. I want to skip ahead to where you are today. So Beauty Counter was valued at $1 billion and sold in 2021 to Carlyle Group. You stepped down in 2022. Can you share what the sale and the transition that followed was like mentally, emotionally? How do you think back on it now?
Oh, such a good question. Well, selling your company as a female founder and entrepreneur to hit $1 billion valuation was just, the feeling was honestly indescribable. I was just so proud of the team, and it's never been about the money. And that's not to say that I don't care about earning money, because I absolutely do care about earning money. I think somehow that $1 billion valuation was important to me because it just proved that clean mattered, that women can do this. It was less about how much money I did or did not make. And as I said earlier, I wish I'd made more, but that's okay. I did well. I think that was just like, I remember the day, it actually, crazily enough, was on my dad's birthday, the day we closed, which was just emotional because he had died when I was in my 20s. And I felt enormously proud of everything that we had done. After I sold the business, the summer of 21, our business kind of fumbled a little bit. It was the first few weeks and months. I mean, it literally happened concurrently that the world opened up and people redirected their spend away from personal care products and into fashion and into travel. And if you have a choice between buying a new pair of jeans or buying a serum, people at that moment, understandably, were buying jeans or going on a trip or whatever they were doing. And that made my investors very uncomfortable. And so, the obvious decision at that point is, well, let's remove the CEO because they can't handle the business. And I had built the business really successfully for 8 years. I think I did a brilliant job during COVID, and I think they felt maybe I had enjoyed a COVID bump. I think actually it was flawless execution during COVID, but I think not flawless execution coming out of COVID. I don't think I did a good enough job as the CEO of anticipating where things were going and how to handle it. But after, I guess it was, 4 months, they made the decision to remove me as CEO and brought someone else in at the end of January of 2022. And that was very difficult for me because I felt like I had the capabilities to run the company. I also wasn't happy with the choice of person, and he was arrogant and didn't really feel there was room for both of us in the business, and made that pretty clear pretty quickly.
It's such a mistake. If there's a founder in the mix that's interested in still participating in the company, I think the biggest loss that a company can have is like that DNA. You've seen it happen time and time again across so many companies. You can see how detrimental it is to the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if there's one thing that I've learned through this experience, and certainly from him, is that there's no place for arrogance in the workplace. And quite frankly, to ignore the institutional knowledge, not just of the founder, but the entire team. And to not ask for context on decisions that seemingly were poor choices. Like, we made some mistakes, of course, but sometimes there's a whole lot more to the story than you understand at face value. And if you're not asking the questions, you're not going to understand, why did you do this versus this at that moment? And he just had no desire because he knew best.
To back up a little bit too, I'm curious to know, because you are one of the most successful female founder exits. How did you decide who to sell the company to? Did you run a process? Did they approach you? Okay.
Yes. I think one of the things that's also been challenging over the last couple of years, as the company did go into foreclosure after the business was sold, I think that what oftentimes consumers don't realize, but also for us, the people that were selling the product, I'm extremely direct and very transparent about everything. At least I feel like I try to tell everybody anything and everything that they want to know. But when you raise capital, and you know this, but if you're a founder and you're raising capital, those investors expect a return on their investment, which means there is a timeline for them to get to an exit. And whether that exit comes in the form of a sale or an IPO or whatever it is, they are looking for liquidity. They oftentimes have raised money themselves and are going to return it to their investors. So when we decided to sell Beauty, we'd actually been approached by a large strategic company a couple of years prior. I turned that deal down because I felt like we weren't ready to sell, and I just wasn't there yet. As I said to them, you're the guy I want to marry. It's just you proposed too soon, and I don't really love the ring you proposed. Come back with a bigger, better rock. I literally said this. They probably thought I was crazy. But anyway, so I turned them out, but I whet the appetite of my investors. So fast forward to 2020. 2021, and our investors had made the decision it was time to run a process, and they could, because we were up against a 7-year window, and they'd been with us for 7 years. And so we ran a formal process looking at both strategic and financial sponsors. We met with, I can't even tell you how many people, and I had built a relationship with the lead person at Carlyle for some years and really trusted him. And they came to us with a really solid offer. They really believed in what we were doing. They actually, even though people don't believe this to be true, they actually very much so believed in women, economic opportunity for women. Like, they were behind us all the way. It was just sort of like kind of bad luck, not bad people, just bad luck, bad timing.
And so then you talked about this. So you stepped down as CEO. You stepped up.
I was named Chief Brand Officer as of February 1st of 2022. And then I was asked to leave the business completely at the urging of the CEO within, 2 or 3 months from there. And I was out completely, off the board, away from the company, and not able to interact.
And then you started making plans to buy it back?
No, I did not. I then, cried and went to therapists and mediums and psychics and healers and anything to get over it. It took me a while, but then in the fall of 2023, the board came back to me. The business had been declining significantly under the leadership of the new CEO. They asked me if I would come back in as CEO. At that point, I had really started to get over it and move on. I kind of had been, 18 months or so, and I kind of thought I'm done. And then I finally, spoke with my family, thought about it, and decided to come back. And so as of February 2024, I re-entered the business as CEO, but it was really just too late at that point. The business was broken, and Carlyle quickly made the decision that they were no longer going to invest in a company. It had gone from being totally profitable and having cash in the bank to not. And they decided not to invest anymore. I think they could see what I couldn't at the time. And we were immediately forced into foreclosure because we were in breach of our debt covenants.
Is there any satisfaction that you get from seeing that happen? What emotional journey do you go on?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think that, yes, of course, it's nice. It's like when you're in love with your boyfriend and he dumps you on your ass and then he comes crawling back. Yeah, of course, like there's that emotional, like, of course you wanted me because you were an idiot. But I think that, no, because it was my company and it was like my movement, and these women depended on me and on us for their happiness sometimes, or their livelihood, or whatever it was. I mean, people entered into the business for a variety of different reasons. I had a huge amount of my equity that had rolled over. So no, at that point I wanted them to win. I didn't want the company to go out of business. And so it was just more really sad and disappointing. It was less of like, I told you so. And it was more of, wow, how did we get here? How did this happen?
Yeah.
To something that was such a beautiful thing for a long time.
Oh, it has to be infuriating.
It was hard.
Let's talk about buying back the business. So 2024, moving into foreclosure. Why buy it back and why not start fresh?
Because I'm totally insane. I think that, so, I wasn't buying it back. We were running a process to try to find a home for it. And, Carlyle was really, really in earnest trying to find a great financial sponsor or a strategic, like they really wanted to sell it. They didn't, I mean, again, people love to bash private equity firms and they have their flaws, but at the end of the day, no one wants a company that you've invested in to go out of business, especially when you paid $1 billion. So they were really working hard to try to find a home. Didn't happen in time. And there was no other option. So I got a phone call from Bank of America on the Sunday night through my lawyer. We're going into liquidity on Thursday. And they basically said, listen, we've spoken to JP Morgan and the rest of the syndicated banks, and we're going to lose our shirts, but she's a pretty compelling founder. She created an incredible business, and we want her to have the option to buy it back. And I wasn't trying to buy it back. And people think I was, but I wasn't. And so I was on spring break with my family. We sat down. My kids were like, you can't let this die. I still cry every time I talk about it. You just worked so hard for so long, Mom. And so, my husband and I said, do we, I mean, it was scary. We reached into our bank accounts and took a huge amount of our savings out, raised a small amount of money, like in 24 hours from some of my old investors, and made the very crazy and difficult decision to buy the business. And we did. And we bought it in a couple of days, which was, scary, really scary. Yeah. But also I just felt like I needed to, I had more work to, I felt like there was more work to be done to protect the health and safety of people. I really wanted to go back in service of this community of women. And I really wanted to see the company live on. So
now I'm excited. It's a good segue to hear about Counter. So a lot of consumers will be introduced to it for the first time this week. What should previous Beauty Counter devotees know about the new brand? And what would you love to share with newcomers?
I think that first and foremost, it is a new company and a new brand. When I purchased the business, what I did realize within like 24 hours was that there was, sadly, no path forward for Beauty Counter. And I didn't buy it knowing that yet. But when I looked at the numbers and the amount of capital that we were able to raise, et cetera, we had to make an incredibly, incredibly excruciating decision to shut the business down, which meant letting go of most of the associates with no warning, with no severance. There was no money, letting go of this huge community of women. And there's been a lot of stories about what went down and why it went down. A lot of people who were really, had a really, really difficult time with this. And some of whom really resent me. I wish they knew the whole story, but It's just never going to, I'll never be able to tell them everything. I don't know who these people are half the time, but it was hard. And so we shut it down on May 1st of 2024. And then we worked tirelessly for 13 months to get it to a soft launch in June of 2025. And it's not just like the new Beauty Counter. We were able to purchase the assets, but we didn't assume the liabilities. But with that comes a lot of work of negotiating with every single vendor with whom you've worked, because there was a lot of debt on the old business. So, I mean, it's a complicated process, which we don't need to get into. But I think what people should know is that this is a new day and a new company. With that said, I'm still absolutely devoted to clean. I think it's worth fighting for. I think a mission of getting safer products into people's hands and helping educate them on the need for safer ingredients and giving them products that they can love and using commerce as an engine for change. Those are things that are the same for me, but I'm different. Like I'm a different person than I was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and certainly 2 years ago. I come in with a deep level, like a level of humility and gratitude for those that have supported me along the way. And I really mean that. It's not lost on me that our former clients and our former sellers and everyone that was involved with Beauty Counter in the Beauty Counter world, whether they were a client or someone representing the brand or an associate, went through a lot. And so when I think about where we are today, I want them to know that we're deeply grateful and that they can expect that we're going to work really, really hard to earn their trust and to give them products that they're going to love. And you know this, but consumers change their minds about what they want every day. And so you can't enter into a business doing what you were doing before. And I couldn't enter into the clean, beauty industry on defense. I need to find ways in which I can go on offense and come in as a leader again. And to me, that's like, how do I set a new and the definitive standard for clean? Because while I was gone, everyone watered down the meaning and no one knows what it means anymore. So there's a lot of work to be done and it's going to be hard, but we're committed to it.
There are two things you touched on. One, I'll say this is the wildest environment to be a founder, and I've been doing this for over 10 years now, and it's just incredibly fast-paced, and we're all experiencing the noise that comes with that, and it makes it a lot harder because we're looking to business leaders to fill a leadership void, I think, that exists in our society right now. And so we're just being asked to do more than ever and keep up with the pace of AI and change and this, that, and the other. And then also forced to try and find clarity, or moments of reflection or to dream so we can keep moving things forward and progressing. So it's a really hard time to be a founder. But the other thing you touched on is we're in really thankless roles. There are always two sides to the story. I've watched countless female founders get canceled or like dragged through the mud. And it is absolutely not the same for male founders and our male counterparts. And so none of us come in ill-willed or like trying to do anything that's wrong. It's unfortunately we're stewards of our business and have to make tough decisions that we are forced to shoulder the burden of. And that's the job we signed up for. But I do think like feelings do get brought in sometimes, and we have to step into like the knowledge and understanding that it's business, it's not personal, and I think that's like one of the hardest parts of the job.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think it's really, really hard. Being a founder is really hard. When I've spoken at business schools, which I've been doing for a very, very long time, you'll often hear people talk about like the end state and the sale. I'm like, you guys, listen, first of all, overnight success is 10 years, 24/7. 24/7 for a decade of your life.
Yeah.
No one else is getting the coffee. No one's changing the roll of toilet paper. No one else is dealing with bearing the brunt of the stress. So if you're in it for the money, you're in it for the wrong reason. The money will come if you do something well that you care about for a very long time. Then if you're lucky, it'll come. And I always say that like whatever you're worth on paper means you're worth zero. Like it doesn't matter. You can be worth $1 gazillion on paper. Until that's actually cleared your bank account, you're worth nothing. So you've got to be willing to work really, really hard. And it is a lonely job, even within your marriage, even within your friendship base, because if you're not a founder, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing, you either are or you are not. There's no thing makes you better or worse for being a founder. But if you're not a founder, it's hard to understand, even within the confines of your own company. Being a CEO is a very lonely situation, and being a founder is. And you're right that today it's very difficult to navigate the world. Things are changing constantly, and things that are happening, whether it's politically or geopolitically or natural disasters. There's so many things that come into play every day. One of the things that I think that is so fascinating about business, and where I think there's such a disconnect between operators and financial sponsors, investors, and I would say this, I've said this 1,000 times, there's what exists on black and white on a spreadsheet, and then there's the real world, and they are not connected. For example, in my life, I live in Los Angeles. I live in the Pacific Palisades. The fires in the Palisades did not exist on my plan that was presented to my investors back in December, nor did the fact that someone just dropped all of our holiday packaging into the port in Long Beach because there was a mishap with a boat that came in from China. These things don't exist on spreadsheets. And so I think as an operator, or if I would just ask of all people supporting brands to understand that it is highly complex, that they're doing their best. They will let you down at times. I have no tolerance for lack of transparency or taking responsibility for mistakes you make. But I think that as founders, we're put in the position to please everyone all the time, and you can't. And to your point, I think that it's a role I signed up for this time, knowing what it was going to be like the second time around. But I can sleep at night knowing the truth of everything that went down with Beauty Counter, and whether I've gotten hate emails or texts or really nasty things that people have said on my Instagram feed, like, I do know the truth. But I also recognize that I will never make everyone happy. And I, of course, have made some mistakes. But to your point, never with malintent. We're all working really, really hard to create something that actually has meaning, that has social impact, that makes the world better. And I wish at times that people who weren't actually building businesses would just cut all founders just a little bit of slack, not when they do something that's illegal or unethical, but if a product doesn't arrive, and it's broken or whatever, is just know that they didn't want to disappoint you. They're there in service of you, and they want you to be happy. And sometimes they just need you to kind of laugh it off with them and let them aim to support you a little bit better the second time around.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add to that is how much every sale, every customer, every interaction means to us. And I think that that's not always fully understood. Like the thing that the well that I go back to is always our customer base. And I've now become so intentional with how I deploy my dollars. And I think that we are having that conversation as a society a bit more right now, in terms of, am I shopping at a company that aligns with my values? It's really easy to do that if you spend a little bit of time on it. And what I will say is, like, I find better products at female-founded brands, and some male-founded, to be clear. But founder-led brands, I typically enjoy more. I understand that when I'm purchasing something from those brands, literally every transaction matters, no matter the size. So I think that, yes, we live really thankless lives that look glamorous at a lot of, outside looking in. But I think that our fuel and our fuel is our customers, for sure.
Totally. We're there. The only business that any of us will ever be in is in the business of people. And I have received so many incredible letters and emails and direct messages that I cherish and I photograph and I respond to. And that outpour, and actually, quite frankly, in this moment in time, the outpouring of love for what we built before, for taking a chance on this new business, for starting Counter, I have felt so supported by women, predominantly women, but also men who are really cheering us on and saying, we really should have named it Phoenix Rising from the Ashes. But I go into this with hopeful and confident, but also humble, and in just the deepest gratitude for those who continue to stay the course with us. So it is a thankless job at times, but it's also the most rewarding job at other times, because you are able to make someone's day just a little bit better, or help them gain just a little bit of confidence, or maybe pass just one more law, or show the business world that you can do well and do good simultaneously. Like, we have such opportunity as founders, even though it's really hard to do.
Yeah. I'd love to close this out by asking some advice. What does it take to be a beauty founder today, and how do you continue to be an effective communicator with your audience, especially when it comes to clean products?
Well, I think in terms of, with respect to beauty, ironically, I don't know very much about the beauty industry. I know it's crazy. I don't really pay too much attention to the beauty industry. And the reason I don't is that I feel like I need to build my company, Counter, and I've always felt this way, on the merits of my business and what I want to do and how I want to do things differently in my own way. So I don't look often at other brands and what they're doing, because it would be daunting, and I think that it would make me insecure. And I'm not one that likes to compare or sort of poach other people's ideas. I really genuinely try to do my own thing. But I do think if you are a beauty founder and you're listening to this, I think that you need to figure out, where can you find white space? Like, where in a very saturated market can you distinguish yourself? What is the moat that you can create around your particular brand? Is it you as the founder? Is it your positioning? Is it the way in which you reach customers? I mean, I think that in many industries, there's just so many options that how are you focusing on your customer, and what's important to that person, I think is really, really important. So I think that's what I would say to founders. And what you're not going to see me do is say my clean is cleaner than your clean, because I think building a brand on defense and with anger is absolutely the worst thing in the world. But I think that I would challenge everyone to articulate their definition of clean. If they're building a clean, if they're claiming to be clean, what does that really mean to you? And be transparent about that, because I think we're pretty transparent about what clean means to us. And I think you're going to see us set a definitive standard. But as I've said, time and time again, clean is not just restricting a list of ingredients and calling it a day. It's looking at the packaging and making sure it's not leaching back the very toxins that you worked so hard to remove from the formulations. It's looking at, are women being treated, with paid with fair wages, but are they safe in the fields? Are they being, there's a lot that goes on out there in fashion industry and the beauty industry. There's a lot of scary stuff happening out there. And so really trying to create systemic change and really looking at what's honestly going on behind the scenes, to me, that's where clean has an opportunity, or beauty has an opportunity to really step in and say, actually, this is where we are. And just be honest about where you are and where you are not. We're not a perfect company. I love companies, in Patagonia, probably arguably one of the best examples, to say, here's where our standards are and here's where we are against those standards. And oh wow, we found out that microfleece, that these fibers are actually really detrimental to the earth. Here we are as this environmentally friendly company. Here, let us be honest about this and show you what action we're taking. And I wish more beauty brands were doing that and get out of the world of secrets and into the world of truth telling.
Yeah. Have you read Dirtbag Billionaire?
I'm reading it right now. My friend David Gellis wrote it, and I have been reading it, and I'm in it, but not finished with it. So but from line one, he had me.
Yeah, same. And I think that it does, everyone should read it. It's excellent, but it does peel back those layers of you're well-intentioned, but there's a lot of discovery that comes on the journey of sustainability in our case.
For sure.
And you want to shop with a company that's committed to doing what's right. And I think there are a lot of companies that are greenwashing.
100%. And Dirtbag Millionaire, for those who don't know, was about Yvonne Chouinard in Patagonia. And yes, I think that you're right. And in an example in my old company, Beauty Counter, but I would carry forward, is we use mica. Mica's used in everything, electronics, cars, you name it. But mica is often used in makeup. And as an example, we could just very easily switch to synthetic mica. And that's what a lot of brands would do. But no, we wanted to go into it, so we physically audited all the mines. First brand that had been out there for 40 years. And we found that there were children in India and in Japan and Brazil mining for mica in our mines, 4-year-olds. Horrifying. But that's the only way that those families were going to be able to put food on the table. So what's the solution there? So we worked with local nonprofits to try to get the kids out of the mines, get adults into the mines, create safer, ways for them to mine for the mica, and help them still have put food on the table. These are the difficult choices that founders have to make every single day. And I hope that, for founders, that if you are a founder or you want to be a founder or you look to founders, that they are the ones that are leading the change. That's the opportunity we have, is to lead the change.
Okay, we've come to the end of our episode, and that means it's time for my favorite segment, Would You Rather? Are you ready?
Is it would I rather eat this or that? Okay. Yeah, sure.
Would you rather start work at the crack of dawn or burn the midnight oil?
Crack of dawn.
Would you rather go back to school to learn a new skill or teach what you know to a class of newcomers?
Teach.
Would you rather accidentally mark every email in your inbox as read or have your calendar get wiped?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Wipe my calendar or accidentally mark everything as read. Probably accidentally mark everything as read, because I hate email. Just can't stand it. They never, ever end.
It'll come back.
It just
if
comes
you
back.
delete
Exactly.
It all,
It'll be there again.
Would you rather write a great piece of feedback or receive a great piece of feedback?
Receive a great piece of feedback.
Would you rather only answer emails with emojis or only answer calls on FaceTime?
Only answer calls on FaceTime.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's great. Would you rather sell another beauty brand or launch another beauty brand?
Launch another beauty brand.
Would you rather accidentally leave your mic unmuted or your camera on?
Oh, gosh. It depends if I'm going to the bathroom. I would say, I think mic unmuted.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Not my choice. I'm talking shit at all times.
Depends. I mean, look, it depends. I'm a really direct person, and I always deal with the consequences of being super direct.
Would you rather start a new beauty brand in the 2010s or in the present day?
That's such a good question. I'm going to go for present day. I mean, it seems so saturated, but you know what? The time is always now.
Yeah, and I feel like the good companies are rising to the top,
Yeah.
Before we go, where can we find Counter today?
You can find Counter on our website, which is counter.com. Those that used to shop Beauty Counter, it'll guide you there. You can find us on our Instagram, which is Counter Beauty Official, and I'm sure we have a TikTok handle, which is like Counter Beauty as well, but I can't remember. And people can also follow me, Gregg Renfrew, because I'm often talking about our products and our brand. Oh, I'm sorry. And also, of course, at Goop. We sell through Goop as well.
Yay.
And through people. And so, if people had someone that was a former, consultant or brand partner or whatever, there's a lot of, there are about 15,000 people that are currently representing the brand. So we're trying to meet you where we are. But right now, mostly people are either reaching us through people or through our e-commerce platform.
Amazing. I hope everyone finds you guys and goes and gets some Counter for their routine. Thank you for being here, Gregg.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Work Friends, a podcast from Argent. Listen and follow on all podcast platforms. Subscribe to the Argent YouTube channel for more clips and bonus content. And follow us on Instagram at Argent for all the latest. And before you go, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and leave a comment. It means so much to us. I'm Sally Christensen, and we'll see you next time.
Work Friends.
Work Friends is produced by Gina Marinelli with editing by Ryan Woldoff. Our theme music is by Karina De Piano and Melanie Naima. This episode was recorded at Podhead Studios in Los Angeles, California.